There are now just 16 days till this year's midterm elections, where we could see a big shift in the balance of power here in Washington. Joining us now for their first joint appearance of 2014, the chair of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, and Florida Congresswoman and chair of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Both of you, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you.
You have to get together more often.
No problem.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the big question. Will Republicans take the Senate? And as you know, there are a bunch of these election labs that are out there. Nate Silver's 538 website says the GOP has a 62% chance of taking the Senate. The New York Times Upshot says a 70% chance. And the Washington Post Election Lab says it's a 93% likelihood. Chairman Priebus, will your party take the Senate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we feel really good about our chances of taking the Senate, and it's partly because, number one, the president's taken the country in the wrong direction. These lieutenants out there across the country have followed the president off the plank, and I think that there's an incompetency malaise across this country where people are not confident in the job that the Democrats have done. And so we're going to win on the issues, but also what you're seeing is that we're winning on the ground. The Democrat advantage in Iowa is all but evaporating, and then in no other Senate state on the ground are we losing. And so we're doing what we need to do to win, but it's more important that we get our country turned around again, Chris.
Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, you could make this a really news-making thing. Are you going to lose the Senate?
No, we are going to hold the Senate. And we're going to hold the Senate because over the next couple of weeks and leading up to even today, the one question that voters are going to ask themselves, Chris, is who has my back? And on issue after issue, Democrats have stood up for jobs, for the economy, for investing in education and health care. Those are the issues that voters are talking about. And the Republicans have engaged in trying to take their health care away, to oppose the minimum wage. And I just want to address what Reince just said about the ground game. Imagine, could anyone have imagined that 2 weeks before Election Day, the Republicans would have to invest in South Dakota, Kansas, and Georgia, blood red states that they are now worried they might lose?
Debbie, you guys are losing everywhere, first of all, and the president hasn't had anybody's back. He hasn't even had your back. And so I don't know whose back these Democrats have, but it's not the American people's back.
Let me interrupt for a minute because I want to talk about that, because I think you would both agree that perhaps the Republicans' best issue is the unpopularity of this president. Look at some interesting numbers here. In these four critical states, with key Senate races, Mr. Obama's approval rating is in the 30s, and all four Democratic incumbents running for re-election in those states have voted with the president more than 90% of the time. Here's how Tom Cotton is going after Senator Mark Pryor in Arkansas.
Senator Pryor has voted with Barack Obama 93% of the time. He cast a deciding vote for Obamacare, and he rubber stamps Barack Obama's foreign policy of weakness and retreat.
Congresswoman, not to get specifically into Arkansas, but isn't the president a real problem for these Democratic senators?
No, and Chris, from that same Fox News poll, Americans indicated that they want Democrats to maintain control of Congress, and Democrats have a higher approval rating than Republicans do in Fox's own poll.
But the president's approval rating is in the 30s in all those states.
But what the president isn't on the ballot here. Republicans are desperate to put him on the ballot because they are trying to run away from their own terrible record. And Mitch McConnell, Mitch McConnell is trying to make this election about anything but his own record, because he was willing to shut the government down last year, costing the economy $24 billion. He's willing to do it again, and that's what we can expect.
First of all, the Democrats are trying to walk a very difficult balance, and Debbie's got a very tough job, because what's happening here is that the Democrats that are running, number one, they don't want to be aligned with the president, because obviously you can't be with his numbers in the tank the way they are. But number two, they also have to defend the fact that they've supported the president in most cases 95, 96, 97% of the time. And as far as Mitch McConnell, look, the Democrats have left Kentucky. I mean, they've left Ellison Grimes high and dry. The fact of the matter is we're winning everywhere, but it's not because of a great situation in our country. It's because things aren't going well, whether domestically or
we got limited time, and I know we could debate any one of these issues on and on. One of the Democrats' best issues is women and what they call the war on women by Republicans. Congresswoman, you have hit that issue hard. Let's take a look.
Scott Walker has given women the back of his hand. And there is no, I know that is stark,
I know that is direct, but that is reality.
While you later said that was a bad choice of words, you're not backing away from the argument that Democrats are helping women and Republicans are launching a war on women?
Well, let's take a look at Scott Walker's record. This is a guy who signed the bill.
I know, but what's the bigger issue?
Taking away enforcing equal pay for equal work. And Scott Walker's record is extremely important. I mean, this is the governor of Reince's own state, who promised famously that he would create 250,000 jobs, and PolitiFact listed that as a broken promise. In fact, in August, Wisconsin actually lost 4,300 jobs. And when it comes to the issues important to women, like increasing the minimum wage, enforcing equal pay for equal work, making sure that that you can make your own reproductive choices and get access to birth control.
Chairman Priebus, let me just ask you about this. I mean, whether it is fair pay or some aspects of Obamacare which do help women, or access to birth control, don't women have legitimate concerns about Republican policy?
Well, not if you look at the latest polls, and if you look at the story this morning out in Politico,
actually,
Barack Obama is losing women in battleground states today. And in fact, if you read the Denver Post and you read the Union Leader, Democrats are, their quote in the Union Leader in New Hampshire, the Democrats are beclowning themselves on this issue. And in fact, when Debbie went to Wisconsin to say to the world that Scott Walker is giving the back of his hand to women, she had to come back and apologize, because then the next day the Wall Street Journal took Debbie to task for her words and actually defended Scott Walker. The fact is, this issue is backfiring on the Democrats, and we're actually going to...
No, go ahead.
Chris, on issue after issue, I mean, I remember Reince in the autopsy that was done by the RNC.
We need to explain. Reince is still alive. He did an autopsy after the 2012 defeat.
Yes, exactly,
okay,
where he said that it wasn't the principles of the Republican Party that was the problem. It was that they needed to speak more nicely to groups like women and African Americans and Hispanic Americans. And just one second, and so then just a couple of weeks ago, Reince did another speech about Republican principles, and continues to...
This is like a card trick that you've seen 10 times.
Guys,
bottom line is, in race after race, in race after race, Democrats are ahead of Republicans when it comes to women.
Winning over women in Colorado. What's happening?
Ebola has now become a big political issue, as we saw in the debate in the Iowa Senate race this week. Here you can take a look. Republican State Senator Joni Ernst with a slight lead over Democratic Congressman Bruce Braley. Here's what they talked about in the debate.
If that means putting travel bans on and it protects the American people, we need to consider doing that. If it means beefing up travel restrictions, we need to do that.
Unfortunately, our administration, including Congressman Braley, has been very reactive rather than proactive.
Chairman Priebus, Democrats say your party has cut funding for the National Institutes of Health and for research on infectious diseases.
Actually, funding to CDC has actually gone up over the last several years, and the last person to actually infuse the CDC with a lot more cash than this president has been George W. Bush. And so the fact is
Ebola a fair political issue?
Well, I think that we should try to refrain from making it a political issue, but I think the problem you have is that Americans, like so many other issues that the president is touching right now, have lost confidence in this president's ability to lead. There is a malaise in this country of how people are feeling that this president is handling big problems. And when you appoint this next individual, the Klain, who is a lobbyist and a political hack, to head up the Ebola crisis in this country, it doesn't give Americans any confidence in this president, and she's going to defend it now.
When you have Republican senators like Rand Paul, who's a doctor who should know better, who are saying that you can be 3 feet from someone who has Ebola and actually get it, I mean, that's an example of how Republicans are politicizing this. Ron Johnson, Louis Gohmert.
Wait a minute, you're politicizing it too. You're talking about all the cuts.
No, what I'm saying
which incidentally, the Washington Post gave 4 Pinocchios to, which is the biggest whopper.
Just to clarify, I have actually not said that.
Have the Democrats said that? I was talking about you as chairwoman of the party.
What I'm saying as the chairwoman of this party is that this is an issue that should not be politicized.
Debbie, do you think there should be a travel ban?
This is an issue that should not be politicized. We need to make, there are 2 cases too many. We have a protocol that needed to be tightened, which has been tightened. We have a team of...
Should there be a travel ban?
Should there be a travel ban?
The president should listen to national public health experts.
I say there should be.
That's it. And I say we should not be rattling our sabers. We should be making sure that people understand that this is something we have to take seriously, but not
by
politicize.
appointing political hacks to head up the Ebola crisis in America.
By working together to make sure that we don't create hysteria and that we address legitimate problems.
But both sides have made it a political issue. Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, Chairman Priebus, thank you both. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
You should do it more often. This is a pretty good act.